then adjourn. Okay, we're going to start with the live in just a moment. Hello, good evening. My name is Linda Slater. I am going to be your moderator for this evening and host for this proposition forum on Measure D. I am a resident of San Leandro. I do not live or vote in the city of Hayward. As with all league forums, the moderator is objective person with no endorsement on these issues. Welcome to those of you who are here live and those of you who are watching on Channel 15. This show is being recorded tonight on Channel 15. There will be a repeat showing of the show on Monday, April 25th at 7 p.m. The League of Women Voters of the Eden area is a trusted, nonpartisan political organization that has been active in this area for nearly 60 years. Our members do the hands-on work to safeguard democracy. While we never endorse a candidate or a party, we are directly involved in shaping the important issues to keep our community strong. As a League of Women Voters member, I have the opportunity to contribute in ways that have a great impact on local, state, and even national interests. If you are interested in learning about how you can make a similar impact, I encourage you to pick up some of the League of Women Voters information available here tonight in the lobby, or visit our website at www.lwvea.org. And membership is open to men and women. The views expressed in this forum are those of the speakers, not those of the League of Women Voters, and the sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the League of this proposition. I want to describe the format to you briefly. There will be one speaker from each side, the pro and con, to present their arguments either for or against the proposition. Each speaker will be allowed to speak for 4 minutes. The first position will be the opposition. Mr. Larry Yeoman will speak on that, and then the Mayor Barbara Halliday. After the speakers give their presentations, we will ask questions prepared by the League or collected from the audience. The keys to the League's success is forums that are unbiased, factual information. We've adopted careful and objective participation criteria for the forums, part of which requires us to screen the questions from the audience to ensure that questions cover the subject matter and are not personal or otherwise don't deviate from the objective and informative goals of the League. So we will go ahead and start. You can introduce yourselves, please, and then go ahead and start your 4 minutes opening argument.
Good evening. I'm Larry Yeoman. I'm a resident here of Hayward and a civil engineer with a business down the street on B Street. Should I just proceed with my argument then? Okay.
Please.
So if you would have told me a couple of months ago that I'd be up here talking about this utility tax, I would have thought you were crazy. I didn't have a particular interest in this tax because really I don't pay that much toward it at all. It's not because I'm trying to evade the tax, it's simply due to the choices I make concerning utilities. For my home and office phones, I use a free voice over internet service, and free can't be taxed. For my cell phone, I use a pay-as-you-go, no contract plan, and it's not affiliated with any address. It can't effectively be taxed either. For television, I use a simple antenna and watch YouTube videos over the internet. Unlike cable television, it's not taxed either. So, clearly it's really not a fair tax because I'm not paying much toward it, but yet I avail myself to all the city services that everyone else does as well. So what am I doing here? Well, I'm here to offer you an alternative perspective, I guess. I'm not here for any special interests. There's no money backing my point of view. I'm not a spokesman for a political action committee. I just feel that someone ought to counter the tens of thousands of dollars of your money being spent on pollsters and these campaign materials that you've been getting in the mail from the city. So the pertinent question to ask is this tax extension necessary? And I say no. The tax was enacted as part of a fiscal emergency, and its purpose was to get us through the recession. It did that. Its purpose has been fulfilled. But now we have city staff and council who have become way too comfortable with the amount of revenue the supplemental tax brings in. They say it's now the city's third largest revenue source, as if this is some sort of delightful surprise. But when proposed, the expectation was that it would be the third largest revenue source. The fact that it has met expectations for its temporary 10-year life is not a justification for extending it further. But our leaders say future expenditures are projected to rise faster than revenues. To this, I shake my head. It's like walking into your boss's office and saying, I've crunched the numbers, and in future years, I expect to buy a house I can't afford, a new car I can't afford, and a maid service I can't afford. So you better keep giving me that bonus you gave me last year, or else there'll be severe and devastating consequences. Folks, we do not have a revenue problem. We have an expenditure problem. Our city leaders want you to believe that this is not their fault and there's nothing they can do. They blame the likes of CalPERS, the state retirement system, and the future obligations we have to contribute toward it. These future contributions are based on how we're compensating the employees now. In my written argument against the measure, I refer you to the website transparentcalifornia.com. And if you visit that site, you'll find a database of public service employees' salaries. And if you review those of Hayward employees, you'll see some very generous compensation amounts. In 2013, for example, we compensated one firefighter over $428,000 for the year. Now, you might dismiss this as some kind of crazy anomaly, but if you review the data on transparentcalifornia.com, you'll find that there are many firefighters being paid over $300,000 per year. And you might think, meh, it's just a few guys at the top, they're heroes, what's the big deal? This is a reckless position. Again, the problem is that our future obligations to the pension system are based on how we're compensating employees now. The pension benefit is based on the highest year of compensation earnable. The city's previous fire chief retired in May 2012. According to transparentcalifornia.com, he's now receiving a pension of about $215,000 per year. That's more than 17% of his base salary. If this fellow receives a pension, okay.
Thank you. Hopefully you'll get a chance to explain more in your future questions. And yes, now the position for the measure, please.
Well, hello. I'm Barbara Halliday, Mayor of Hayward. Was elected 2 years ago. I want to thank the League for hosting this event and giving me the opportunity to be here and talk about my support for Measure D and its huge importance to our city's future. And I know that I speak for everyone who's part of our city government in thanking the voters for approving the utility user tax in 2009. At that time, we were working very hard to strengthen our partnerships with neighborhoods and businesses and solve problems to make sure we were addressing the needs of the people living and working here and delivering effective and high-quality services as efficiently as possible. We were hoping with the passage of what was then called Measure A to actually augment our public safety and maintenance teams, but the recession was just getting started at that time, and we did not know then how long and difficult and devastating to our city revenues that it was going to be. as it turned out then, the passage of Measure A just allowed us to get through that difficult time and maintain service levels and avoid layoffs, despite the significant drop in property and sales tax revenues that recession brought us. This 5.5% tax that the voters approved has, as Mr. Joman just said, become the third largest source of revenue for the city, lagging fairly well behind, but third to property and sales taxes. It brings us about $16 million annually, and it represents about 12% of our general fund budget. Without it, we will be forced to reduce the size of our workforce throughout the organization, making us less able to respond to community needs. We're seeking renewal now for a tax that won't expire until 2019 so that we can plan for our future with more certainty. In the meantime, we continue to strive to make city government as efficient as we can while still moving Hayward forward and achieving our goals of a safe, clean, green, and thriving city. We have undertaken difficult negotiations. Mr. Joman spoke about PERS, Public Employee Retirement System, and and the costs. We don't have control over that, but we have tried to change what we have to pay. We have undertaken difficult negotiations with our employee bargaining groups to achieve concessions really unheard of in other parts of the Bay Area, such as agreement by most of our employees who have foregone raises for 5 years until recently, and are now contributing more toward the costs of the retirement and medical benefits that they receive. We have also sought and won grants to augment our own resources and provide better programs and services without spending more Hayward taxpayer money. We've been innovative in developing better, less expensive, and more environmentally friendly ways of doing things, such as the way we repair our streets and sidewalks. And as the economy improves, our hard work is paying off, and we are attracting new residents and businesses to Hayward who will in turn improve our revenue picture, but that will take time. And in the meantime, passage of Measure D is vital to continuing our success and moving Hayward forward. Like most cities in California, Hayward has taken a huge hit in the past couple of decades in terms of property taxes returned to us, or actually I should say not returned to us by the state. And we, like other cities throughout the county and the state, have had to look to new sources of revenue like utility user taxes. Local government is the closest form of government to the people it serves. My colleagues and I on the City Council want to be held accountable for how we spend the revenue we receive, and we are committed to continuing our search for better and more efficient ways to serve this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we'd like to get into our questions. If any of you in the audience have questions for the speakers, please fill those out and they will be collected. Okay, and we will allow each speaker 2 minutes to respond to the questions. So we'll go ahead and start with the speaker. If Measure D does not pass, how would you close the $16 million annual revenue gap it would leave?
That would be very difficult, and I don't think that we could do it without reducing our workforce. And reducing our workforce, what we provide is services. Services are provided by people who are employed. We would first look to our reserves, but we don't want to eliminate them entirely. It would be difficult, but I think the major thing is we would have to reduce the number of employees that we have. I just was at a meeting the other night in one of our neighborhoods where they have been, while crime overall is down in the city, in this particular neighborhood, they're experiencing some problems. They want more time from our police officers. Mr. Joman talked about the compensation for our firefighters, and I think that's a little off. Some of that, I can't, some of the money, the extra money that is, our firefighters are not receiving those kinds of salaries, but they do, we are part of mutual aid in the state, and they do fight forest fires that we have every summer now, and we do get reimbursed for those costs, but they do earn that money when they're up there in the middle of those terrible fires. I watched them put out a fire on my street a couple weeks ago. This is not an easy job, and most of the firefighters we have on staff do not earn anything like that, but they do get retirement and medical benefits, and I think that's appropriate for people who do those kinds of jobs. They're very, they place a lot of strain on your health. So, you know, our employees are not wealthy people. They're not making a lot of money. And we are paying benefits commensurate pretty much in the average of other municipalities comparable to us in the area.
Thank you. Mr. Joman, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
If Measure D does not pass, how would you close the $16 million annual revenue gap it would leave?
Well, the tax is basically a supplemental bonus to what we would have normally have. And what has happened over the time that the recession has occurred is the other revenue sources have rebounded and kind of basically returned to the levels they were at the time that the recession started. So basically the 16 million is basically on top of what we're normally used to, the normal revenues that the city would receive. So it's basically a bonus and not to be, you know, a thing that needs to be replaced necessarily. We knew this was a 10-year temporary tax, and we're actually ahead of the game. We have 3 more years of the economy returning to normal. So this is basically a windfall for the city to receive this money of $16 million on top of the normal revenue that the city would usually receive.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Joman, we'll start with you first. Are there other sources of municipal revenue, if any, that are more acceptable than the utilities user tax? Why and how much revenue do you project the alternate source would provide?
Well, like I said, I don't think we have a revenue issue. We have an expenditure issue. So I'm not out there considering alternatives and looking for more money. Although, of course, that would be nice if it would come to us through grants or something to that effect, but I don't see the need to tax the citizens any further.
Thank you.
Well, you know, one thing is that we may have to eliminate some services. We may have to, you know, contract out for services at a lower cost that I'm sure would not be as responsive to our residents. You know, we simply would have to cut back. You know, the property taxes have somewhat come back, but one of the things is that we now have more people in Hayward than we had in 2009. People are moving here, and we are seeing development of residentially zoned land that we really can't stop people from developing. And residential development, unfortunately, does not, it ends up most of the time either barely breaking even or often costing the city more in services than it brings in tax revenue. We have been working very hard to bring new businesses in to raise revenue, so I think that is one source that we could look to that might improve in the next few years. But there are other forces at work. I see that, you know, we cannot be sure that, you know, that recession may be over. I think we're, you know, some economists are predicting that we are due for another one. You cannot predict what's going to happen. We need to ensure that we have some stability in our government so that we can provide consistent good services and keep our community safe and healthy.
Thank you. We'll start with you again, Ms. Halliday. Are there any changes that you would recommend to the current utilities user tax ordinance to make it stronger and/or more equitable?
I think we have tried to make it equitable. People who are low income and qualify for the PG&E reduction in their bill, certainly get that break from it. It applies to everybody in the city who uses utilities, our residents, our businesses. It applies to homeowners as well as renters, people who live in the city. It applies to Mr. Joman. I can't believe he doesn't use any electricity or natural gas or, phone services, but I applaud him for being creative in how he receives his information. But I don't think most people receive theirs that way. So we think that it is equitable and it's spread over a variety of sources, and it applies to everybody. So I don't think that we do have, once again, a sunset clause in, so if the citizens don't like what we're doing, they can vote it out. But I think that the ordinance was based on a model ordinance that was produced by the League of California Cities, and we followed that. And there are things that we can't tax by federal or state law. So.
Thank you. Mr. Choman?
Well, I don't think there's much you can do with the existing UUT because of what the mayor has mentioned, is that federal law prohibits the taxation of the internet, for example, or over-the-air transmissions. So, the way that I've creatively received my information is perfectly legal, and I do so, again, not to avoid the tax, but because it's actually a better way of receiving that information. So I do pay for electricity and gas, of course, but even that technology is changing, and over the next, the next 3 years perhaps, a lot of people are going to be moving off the grid. There's new technology coming online, like the Tesla Powerwall and all the solar panels people are installing. They're going to be going off the grid too, and the taxation regarding that is going to fall as well. So I don't really know what you can do with this particular tax that would make it any better. And I also like to mention that the tax is inefficient in another way. It's so convoluted that basically the city has to have a consultant manage it. And that consultant actually receives 0.5% of the revenue every year. So your tax money is going to pay a private firm to manage this tax. I don't think that's appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Choman. Okay, and we'll start our last question. Are there any questions from the audience that I have not received? Okay. Our last question is, please explain in a little more detail your reasons for your position on Measure D. And we'll start with you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, again, it doesn't affect me to the point where it would concern me too much, but I think it's a fairness issue. I don't think we're all paying the same amount, and I'm putting myself out there as someone who's not paying his fair share, basically. So if we really want to tax everyone fairly, this is not the way to go about it. But also, again, this is a tax that was temporary. It was meant to get us through the recession, and it has. I have a chart. I plotted the city's data. And it shows that, 6 years in, we're back to where we were. And going forward, it's only going to get better. Now, possibly way down the line, or even 3 years down the line, there may be an issue with the economy again. But at that time is when we should address it, not now. It doesn't make any sense to say, let's vote this thing in for an arbitrary 20 years. It's not based on any financial reasoning. At least this tax, when it was enacted, it was for a 10-year horizon, because that's what the city staff projected would take the real estate economy to recover. And 7 years in, it has. And so, like I said, I think we're going to reap a windfall for the next 3 years. But if the economy were to crash, we should address it at that time appropriately and set a horizon that's appropriate. This is just an arbitrary 20-year timeline that was based on the discussion of council as to what the electorate would accept. I don't think it's appropriate.
Thank you. Mayor Halliday.
During the 12 years I have been on city council, the past 2 as mayor and 10 years before that on the city council, I have seen how hard we have worked together as a council and with our staff very ably headed by one of the best city managers in the state, probably, Fran David, work very hard to be more responsive to the citizens, to our neighborhoods, to our businesses, and they want the services that we provide. They want more of them. They want the protection that our police provide. They want the emergency, both fire protection and emergency medical response that our fire department so capably provides. They want better maintenance of our streets and roads, and they want, they want the city to look cleaner and better. And we have responded in many ways to meet those expectations. But we can't do it without, we get a lot of volunteers from our community to help us in these endeavors, but we can't do it with professional staff, and we can't attract quality professional staff if we can't afford to pay the going rate that is out there, that other communities pay their staffs. Actually, on the whole, we pay, especially I think the higher we go in the hierarchy, the lower percentage of, the lower our staff is paid compared to other places. So we are trying our best to hold together in the face of things like the state takeaway of redevelopment and other property tax revenues that we receive, in the face of escalating costs of the pensions provided by PERS, in the face of escalating costs of fixing our roads, of the materials that we need to do that. Costs have gone up significantly too. So having about the same amount of money isn't cutting it anymore. And we want to be able to continue to provide those services. So.
Thank you. So that concludes the questions that we have for the speakers this evening. So we do want to give each of our speakers an opportunity to do a closing statement. We'll start with, we begin with Mr. Joman. We'll start with Mayor Halliday. And so go ahead and do your closing statement, please. Is that agreeable to you?
It is. I didn't prepare a closing statement, so I'll just thank you, though, for the opportunity to say some things. I'd like to respond to some of the things. As I said, I don't think our employees are overpaid. We have tried, we would like to bring the costs of employing people down, and we are looking to and have gotten our employees to agree to a lot of concessions. It was so painful to go through some of these negotiations and to ask people to go for 5 years without any salary increases, and to ask people to, pay more toward the cost of the benefits. But as we know, that's happening across the state, across the nation, as far as benefits going down, salaries going down, and we can't here in Hayward solve that problem, but we can do our best to respond to the needs and wants of our community, and that's what we've been trying to do. And we do struggle mightily with our budget. We pay very close attention to it. We do have to do long-range planning. You just don't say, oh, gee, next year we might get some more revenue, so let's put something else here in the budget. It's very important to run an efficient and well-oiled organization that you know that you can plan ahead. We have a 10-year budget projection, and that is showing gaps between our revenues and expenditures that we cannot control unless we reduce the number of employees, because when you bargain, and California has very strong laws protecting labor in terms of bargained for contracts, and some of these provisions were bargained for many years ago. And while we are having some success in changing some of the provisions in them and reducing the costs, those costs still are going up. Medical costs are going up, and the PERS is doing what it should be doing in terms of charging us more so that they have the money to pay the retirement costs. But again, it's just costing us more. So we really have had to cobble together our revenue, and this particular tax is very important to us.
Thank you. Mr. Drummond.
So, I do think we have some control over the retirement, because basically each year PERS does an actuarial accounting of how much we need to have in order to pay the pensions of those who are retiring. And I think the data doesn't lie. The data is online. That is what we are paying. It's the data was supplied by the city to transparentcalifornia.com. And, for example, the firefighters, they have a retirement formula. It's called 3% at 50. That means they can retire at 50 and get paid 3% for every year of service they put in with the city. So if they work for 30 years, they get 90% of their salary, and it's 90% of the highest year, okay? So no matter where they get that money from, if they work on the fire lines and the forest fires or what have you, they build up 1 year of salary that's enormous. That 90% is applied to that value, and that allows the retirement pensions to be enormous. I mean, as I was saying before, the previous fire chief, he retired with a $215,000 per year pension. Now, if he lives for 30 years, that's $6.5 million we're paying for one person. And this is not unusual, okay? This needs to be controlled. These are the expenditures that need to be controlled. That's what they need this tax for, is for this potential future problem. And I think this is what needs to be addressed rather than making it easy and saying, let's just take in the money and allow it to continue. I don't agree. This tax was intended to get us through the recession. It has. I have the data, and I have a blog. I'll post it on there if you want to review it. Please be my guest, heyhayward.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on my blog site as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all of the live audience for participating. I'd like to thank our speakers and give them a round of applause for coming tonight. And thank you to those of you watching us on Channel 15. This forum will be re-shown on Monday, April 25th at 7 p.m. I'd like to remind you that the views expressed tonight in this forum are those of the speakers and not of the League of Women Voters, and the sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the sponsor of any of the views on the propositions. If you'd like to find more information about voting, please go to voteredge.org and remember to vote on Election Day, November 7th. And welcome and thank you again for letting the League of Women Voters help keep our community safe, strong, and vibrant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.